pause that builds the tension, everybody. Go with it. Go with it. Play into the tension. Welcome to the club. All right, good afternoon, WonderCon. That's the best first yell I've had at a panel all weekend, but given the panel that we have, that is not good enough. Good afternoon, WonderCon. It is my distinct personal pleasure to be here today, moderating the very first DCE panel celebrating Batman's 75th anniversary. I'm John Cunningham from DC Entertainment, and I would, as much as I would love to spend the next hour regaling you with my personal and ingenious insight into Batman's history, fortunately for all of you, that is not going to happen. So let me introduce the awe-inspiring group of people who are going to come up here and do just that for you. First up, we have a gentleman who is arguably an icon like Batman in his own right. He was the illustrator of some of the most memorable Batman stories we have published, including All-Star Batman and Robin and the now legendary Batman Hush. His distinctive art style has influenced an entire generation of comic book artists and fans, and he's now the co-publisher of DC Comics, Mr. Jim Lee. Our next guest is the Senior Vice President of Creative Affairs for Warner Brothers Animation. Among the more recent DC Entertainment projects he has overseen are Young Justice, Green Lantern Animated Series, the wildly inventive DC Nation shorts, Beware the Batman, and Teen Titans Go. Please welcome Mr. Peter Girardi. Our next guest is a gentleman who is responsible for what I believe to be one of the most popular and influential iterations of Batman during these last 75 years. Beginning in 1992, his interpretation of the Dark Knight spanned 2 decades of Warner Brothers animated TV shows and movies. His amazing credits include Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited, Mr. Bruce Timm. Our next panelist has worked side by side with Mr. Timm during this amazing run, and he is quite simply, for all intents and purposes, the voice of Batman. Please welcome Mr. Kevin.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Our next guest once wore a Batman-styled cape and cowl in a movie. He is also a director, screenwriter, actor, author, host of the monthly podcast Fat Man on Batman, and a comic book writer. Please welcome Mr. Kevin Smith. Is well known to most of you who reside in the greater Los Angeles area from his voice work on KROQ's Kevin and Naveen Morning Show. He also hosts the Hollywood Babylon podcast with Mr. Smith and will be co-writing the Batman Green Hornet book coming later this year with Kevin. Please welcome Mr. Ralph Garman. So today, what we're going to try to do in the brief time that's been allotted to us, we have 75 years of Batman history to cover in about 40 minutes. So hang on to your seats. What we're going to do is run through. We have a slideshow chock full of different images and different cool items from throughout these 75 years, focusing mostly on the last 50. And some of them our panelists will talk to directly, the other ones will cajole them into giving their impressions. So we're going to start off where we were 75 years ago. That is the cover to Detective Comics 27. If I was Monty all, I would ask if anyone in this room has an original copy of Detective 27, hold it up and you can come on stage. I doubt that's the case. I think the last big auction was in 2010. It sold for $1,075,000. So, frankly, if you brought one of those with you today, you can come up here and do whatever you want to if you give it to me. So that cover has been iconic and has lived forever. And the next slide I want to show you shows a few more of those covers. And you can see that not only is Batman celebrating his anniversary, the world, as we come to talk today, you'll see the world of Batman is something we all know more intimately than we would probably admit. From his sidekicks like Robin and Batgirl, and especially on the next slide, Rogues Gallery, his villains, which I think in some ways are as indelible as anything that's happened. So let's go to our first general question, because it's the easiest way to start a discussion like this. Who is your favorite Batman villain, panelist, and why? And I'm going to start with Jim Lee.
Yes, I'm going to have to go with Catwoman, because I think we all know that temptation we must resist, and I think it's interesting because she's always been a character that kind of walks the, she's a criminal, and in some ways Batman, he's a vigilante too, so they both kind of share some common ground, but at the same time he's a character that, obviously he's got to stop, and can't for whatever reason, and then she knows it too. I love the fact that she kind of plays with him just like he's a bauble or something like that, and I just think they make a really great couple, and they look good together too, so what do you say?
Peter?
Well, I think maybe two answers. One is I grew up on the Adam West Award show, so I really like a lot of those crazy characters from that show. Yeah, King Tut. All those characters. But then in the more canon, Two-Face for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I could actually narrow it down to just one because I love them all for all various reasons. But if I had to, I would say Catwoman because Julie Newmar.
There are so many. I guess I have an unusual relationship with Mark Hamill, though. So, I would have to say the Joker. He brings out the best in me, and I bring out the worst in him. So we work well together.
I'm so pissed because Batman stole my answer. I'm going to go a bit more esoteric with the answer, though. Of course, there's a wonderful rogues gallery we can all choose from. But in terms of favorite villain, I'm gonna skew it a bit differently and say favorite obstacle that Batman has to overcome, which could be a villain. But in this instance, is my favorite aspect of the Batman character. It's his humanity. That's the only thing that stops him, and you see the frustration as he's portrayed throughout every medium with the inability to go that one step further. He resents Superman because Superman has no limits, and Batman has spent his whole life searching for those limits, and it's only when he hits the ceiling of his humanity that he can possibly be stopped, and as we've seen even then, sometimes he overcomes it. So I'm going with Batman's humanity.
Well, crap, anything I say now doesn't sound lame.
Like Bruce, because of the series, the Riddler for me always had a special place in my heart. Frank Ocean's performance in that role was just indelible. He created that character for me. I always think of him that way.
Well, if it's one of my operating theses that every generation of America dates itself by where it comes to Batman, I think the age of our panel was just outed by the number of references to the next slide, which is Batman 66, the TV series that debuted then. First, for those that aren't aware, if you somehow missed the announcement that came from Conan O'Brien earlier this year, sometime late this year, this is going to appear on DVD and Blu-ray for the first time ever. Stop being memory and cheesy little VHS tapes you watch that you bought from somebody downstairs. And if you go to the next slide, we have been adapting Batman 66 for a little while now in digital series. We just collected it into its first hardcover, and we just found out on Wednesday that on April 27th, this book's going to debut on the New York Times list at number 2 in the hardcover graphic novel slot, which I think speaks to the popularity of this iteration of Batman, but also the great job that our editorial team and our talent team doing Batman 66 has come together. So coming later this year is Batman 66 Meets the Green Hornet, which Kevin Ralph for writing. And gentlemen, there's no pressure on you now that you know the previous users of Batman 66 comics have become New York Times bestsellers. No one's expecting that from you. But I'm guessing, based on some of the answers I just heard and what I know, that TV show was a real cultural moment for you guys especially. So how much of that do you want to bring, and how much do you want to try to give it your own spin when you do this, or do you want to say anything at all about what you're about to do?
Well, when Kevin and I started working on the book, we realized that there had been a strong template sort of given to us. I mean, there are certain characteristics of the show, certain aspects of the show that you have to sort of adhere to in order to make it feel like an episode of that show. So we had this great work that Lorenzo Semple and other writers had given via the series, and then as fans, you get to play what if. What would I have liked to have seen had there been other episodes that we didn't see, especially when it comes to the amazing crossover episode between Batman and the Green Hornet and Kato and Robin. Because that was the first, Kevin and I were talking about how it was the first superhero crossover live action we had ever seen, and what a big impact that made on us. So we get to play with those characters and those that template and have a good time with it.
Yeah, when you think about it, like that was our Avengers when we were kids. Like, holy shit, two dudes in masks standing next to each other. For me, I think it was just kind of important to honor the Batman that brought us into the world of Batman. The Batman 66, we didn't call it that when we were kids. We just called it Batman. That was my first Batman. That was my introduction to the character, and then the comics, of course, kind of came after that. And I was like, oh my God, he's a completely different Batman. I was into Batman, of course, right around '89 when the movie came out. Right prior to that, Frank Miller took him dark and stuff. Batman kind of returned to his more dark Knight detective roots. And there was this general sentiment that if you grew up with the Batman, Adam West Batman, kind of turned your back on it, man, the way like Peter denied Christ. Like, you just suddenly got to this place with the book where people are like, hey man, do you like that Batman, the old Batman? You're like, no man, I never watched that one. No man, that Batman's stupid. Yeah. And some are cock crows. So there was that period. I think the first person who set me straight, man, was Matt Wagner, the great Matt Wagner, who did Mage, and he also did for Batman, a couple of Batman Grendels, and a couple other books. Wonderful artist, great storyteller, one of the greats of indie comics and of the big two he's worked with. So Matt, I was talking about, he had a line in one of the Batman Grendel crossovers, I think it was the second one, and Robin was in that, and he had a line at one point where Batman was going to refer to Robin as well, Little Chum. And DC editorial at that point was like, don't do that. Don't, because people will remember that fucking show. Don't do it. And so they made him take it out. And I was like, good thing, man, because who cares about that old Batman? That's your grandpa's Batman. And Matt Wagner was the first one who, like, in my world, who stood up for that Batman. And he goes, you know what, man? Don't sell out on that Batman. That was your first Batman. Like, before any of this, before he went dark, that was your Batman, so honor that Batman. And I was like, oh, Matt Wagner schooled me. And then from that point forward, I would go out to other people and they would bag on Batman and be like, man, you know what, you're a poser. You should honor that.
So now you get to do that and develop Green Hornet and bring in the whole late 60s ABC TV vibe and go, guess what, this is all valid now. It's all worthy of doing, but it is such a cool conceit. And I think especially the first couple of promo images, the likenesses really give you...
The covers by Alex Ross, they're just astounding. They're gorgeous. Even if you didn't like Batman 66, you look at these covers and you're like, I would like to own that cover. You could tell, like, you know, Alex is always consistently amazing, but you could tell the stuff that captures his imagination, and you could tell that he loved Batman 66, because those covers are mind-bendingly good.
So we have one generation that's sort of captured in that late 60s moment. Batman goes along and lives along, and then we get to the late 80s, and a couple of big explosions happen. In 1986, Frank Miller hits with The Dark Knight Returns, probably up to that point the most shocking iteration of Batman that was ever there, and I think anyone who was a Batman fan or certainly a comic book reader was gobsmacked in the face when that came out. And I'm guessing that since you've been able to work with Frank on Batman after that, Jim, that's probably one of those moments when you first saw that book, you didn't imagine that's where your life was going to go.
Yeah, I was actually a senior in college when this book came out, and all I remember was those horrible Batman 66 cartoon shows or TV shows going, oh, I can't live with this is awful. Like, how am I going to think about a career in comics if that's what I have to live up to. And this came out and it changed my life. It really did. And I was collecting comics. I still had comics mailed to my home, but I was really just unenthusiastically collecting them. And then this came out. It wasn't just that it was hand colored. It wasn't just the fact that it was on shiny paper in a new format. The level of sophistication to the storytelling, the narrative, the political themes, the social themes, just blew me away. And then there's a scene where Batman, he's like 70, 75 years old, and he's naked, and he's taking a shower, and that was, it made me tingle in a weird way. You remember the scene, right? He had his mustache, and he realizes he shaved it off. Like, oh snap. Like, it was the force of Batman. He thought he could drop the cowl, but it was deep inside him. And it was just very powerful, mythical, and it really got me inspired, that scene in particular, to get into comics. And so I put my first portfolio together in '87, got work shortly after. So it was a life changer.
I think the other thing that's important to remember is we love that phrase Dark Knight now, but this is when Batman went dark. And I don't think in pop culture he was really seen that much as a dark character. I mean, coming off the TV series, that wasn't a possibility at all. But this is where he first started getting cast that way, and that phrase had, today it's something that's used so handily, but it had a lot of resonance then because the dark part of that meant a lot. And I think that was what was fully at play in 1989. When we go to our next slide. Next Before I came in here today, I was telling somebody I was doing this panel, and without any prompting, they ran through the story. I remember the first time I saw the Michael Keaton Batman movie, and they went through a 10-minute exegesis about remembering specifically what night they saw it, how many people were in the theater, and it just, again, it was a great, reiteration to me that everybody has those cultural moments. So I'm just curious if anybody on the panel can remember specifically when they saw that movie or what impact it had on them. Because I think also today we've seen so many different interpretations of Batman going on that it's tough to remember. It's tough to remember how impactful that was. Yes, Kevin.
I remember exactly where I was. I was working at Domino's. It was my first day of employment at Domino's Pizza. And I don't know if y'all have ever seen me stand up or if you've seen me without a hockey jersey on. I have childbearing hips. So when you put on a pair of Domino's pants, they just don't look good on you whatsoever. And then you have to wear that uniform. I was poured into it, but not in a good way. And I remember I was working for 2 hours, and they had 4 other trainees there. And so about 2 hours into the shift, they realized they were overstaffed for the evening. And this was June 23rd, 1989. It's a Friday night. Might actually be, no, they didn't do early shows, so it was June 23rd. So my friends were all going to see Batman at the Middletown Movie Theater in the big theater, theater number 1, which in my memory is like 10,000 seats, but really it was probably 300. But it was the big theater, and they were like, we're going, man, you're gonna go. And this is a day before the internet, no smartphone, so I couldn't like call my friend or anything like that unless I used a payphone, which I did, and I called him at his mother's house, and I was like, you guys going? And he's just like, yeah, we're gonna go. I was like, oh, buy me a ticket. He's going, you're working. I was like, I'm gonna quit. So 2 hours into the shift, the manager's just like, we have too many people working on tonight, so who volunteers to go home? And I was like, I do. And he was like, you can't, you're a trainee. And I was like, yeah, but I feel like you're right, there's far too many people here, and I'm happy to come train tomorrow. You can put me on the same time, I wouldn't even count this or anything like that. I just want to get a jump start on a real practice day, like, so tomorrow will be my first real day. And he was just like, okay, fair enough. You're gonna come back tomorrow at the same time. So I left, and I got to the payphone just 1 block from a Domino's, because they didn't want to see me do this, and I called up my friend Brian at his parents' house, and I was just like, I'm coming, I'll meet you at the theater. And I met him at the theater. They had already bought my ticket. We went and sat dead center, man, perfect seats. I went with my friend Walter Flanagan, Brian Johnson, Walter Flanagan, 2 guys that are on Comic Book Man. JC News was with us as well. And so Walter was the guy that had handed me The Dark Knight Returns, got me back into comics. So watching that movie next to Walter, I swear to you, at one point, 2 grown men, we weren't that grown, it's 1989, so I was 18 on the verge of 19 and stuff. Walter, 21. At one point in this movie, when Batman first descends, in the background, the 2 thugs are on the rooftop and they're having a discussion and whatnot. You see in the background, deep background, Batman descends. This is what happens with me and Walter Flanagan. We'll look at the screen, we don't even make eye contact. We just Thelma and Louise 20s if we go.
All right, you remember that night. Your story was better than the guy in the halls, Kevin, if that makes you feel any better. Not to personalize it too much, but I remember that one because my then wife was very pregnant with our soon-to-be son. And if we go to the next slide, this was his bat. This was my now 27. And it apparently was the Batman for a lot of people in here too. And Bruce and Kevin, your guys' run here was so long and so strong. And at what point, if at all, did you realize how big this was going to be and how impactful this was going to be?
Well, you know, it's really weird because it was a different world back then. There was so fewer entertainment options because it was before the internet, before video games really took off and stuff. So it sounds really kind of oddly conceited, but I kind of knew the show was going to be a big hit, more because of how big Batman was in the public consciousness coming off of the first Tim Burton movie. It was such an enormous hit. If you guys don't remember, but it was like Batmania all over again. It was like '66 all over again. Batman was everywhere. And obviously Warner Brothers had dumped a lot of money into the show and they promoted it, a lot. And Fox Kids, promoted it like crazy. So I had a feeling we were gonna have to really screw up badly to make it not a hit. But then, fortunately, it became not just a ratings hit, but a cultural or a critical hit. I mean, we got a rave review in Entertainment Weekly, who don't normally review cartoons, and we got all kinds of press that we weren't really expecting. So it was, we knew it was going to be a hit, but it was kind of beyond what we were expecting.
I didn't have a clue. It was the first animated show I auditioned for. The first one, the first role. Talk about getting the brass ring. But we had been recording these things for months. You do the recordings first, they go off to the artists, and then they come back for what's called ADR, where you sync up the soundtrack with the visual. So we've been doing it for about 6 months before any of us saw anything. And Mark Hamill and I remember were both in the ADR room together at Warner Brothers the first day to do ADR. And on this full screen, that comes up, the lush color, the rich graphics, the full symphony score, just whoosh off the screen. And I looked at Mark, I said, "Did you have a clue that this is what we've been working on?" We both were just speechless. It was overwhelming. You knew what you were creating. We knew the characters we were creating, but we didn't know the visual, what it was going to look like. It was breathtaking, first time I saw it. That's when I realized this was going to be a hot show.
Can I just point out that we're so used to, as the introduction said, Kevin is the voice of Batman. So no matter what, when you read a comic book, I'm sure a lot of people in the room are the same way. Whenever I read a comic book, the voice I hear in my head as Batman is Kevin. So but when you hear him just go passionate or speaking in his normal voice, and you're so used to hearing Batman, it's like if you close your eyes, it sounds like Bruce Wayne's Stone. Because he's so happy, he's just like, oh yeah, it was big on the screen and fun,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so as part of the 75th anniversary year, Warner Brothers Animation has created a couple of quick shorts, and Bruce, the first one you worked on, just debuted on the DC Nation blog, and maybe you can give it a quick setup, and we want to show it for the people here so they can see it on the big screen. I'm just going to ask if you wanted to set it up at all. Sorry. Very hard to hear over here.
It's it's very short. A lot of you know, you've already seen it, but it's 2 minutes long, and it's basically kind of an itch that I've had for years, and I finally got to scratch it. I always kind of wanted to do a straight-up period piece version of Batman that was set strictly in 1939, the year he was created. Unlike Batman the Animated Series, which was kind of retro-styled, I wanted to go full-on period with the clothes and the technology and everything. And then when I came up with that idea, I thought, well, then if I'm doing 1939, then it's got to be in black and white. So my buddy here, Peter Girardi, was in charge of the DC Nation shorts, so I hit him up with the idea, and he said, that's great, do it. This is it.
It's not my money, it's Warner Brothers money. But, I mean, you know, the BTAS, what we call it internally, or maybe even externally, Batman the Animated Series, I mean, for me, it was a watershed moment. I mean, the reason I'm sitting here, a lot of it is because of that series, and, you know, I could see right away, being a huge fan of animation, being a huge fan of comics, and I was into real arty-farty comics, like Heavy Metal, Mobius, and Droulet, and all those kind of French comic artists too, but all that stuff coming together, from the title sequence of BTAS, you can tell, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. There's the storytelling, there's the visuals, there's the way it's mixing together, there's the way it's forming something that had never been done before. And right away, I thought, like, wow, if this is, we can take hero comics and this kind of animation and bring it all together, that's definitely for me. So when we had a chance to do these DC Nation shorts, and Bruce had this idea, I mean, I wasn't going to say no, so
So you didn't say no, and this is the result. Video Meisters, do your magic.